you so much for being here today, and to all of you for all of your enthusiasm and all of your engagement with microenterprise home kitchen operations in California. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm really also very grateful to the team at the Cook Alliance, especially Roya and Lauren, for inviting me to come and share with you a little bit about the environmental health end of the MEHKO grants that Roya shared about earlier on. She shared about the Cook Alliance version. I'm going to talk about what's happening with the environmental health end of it. And then also I'm going to talk a little bit about ways to help engage with your health department and your health inspector and build that relationship. And for those of you who are already MEHKO operators, you probably already have a lot of experience here for folks who've worked in the industry. But for those of you who are thinking about opening a MEHKO or have questions, we'll also have a question and answer session at the end, and it'll be a great time. I'll answer what questions I can, and what I can't answer, I'll take down contact information and get back to you with more information later. So just want to say thanks. So today I'm going to introduce myself. We're going to talk a little bit about how the California Conference of Directors of Environmental Health, which is a nonprofit organization that I work for, is administering the portion of the MEHKO grants that they have. I'm also going to talk about my job with CCDEH, so a lot of resource development and support for MEHKO programs across the state. We'll talk a little bit about how MEHKOs and EHS, environmental health agencies, can have a really strong collaborative work experience. As you know, we're going to have to work together. So how do we do that well and effectively? And then we'll have some time for questions and answers. And if you have questions as I'm going along, you can just stick them in the chat. I'm happy to field questions that way too. So I am recently hired by the California Conference of Directors of Environmental Health to be, my official title is I always have to look at my business cards here. I'm the MEHKO Technical Consultant and Trainer, and I'm also the primary industry liaison between environmental health and the MEHKO industry, so for groups like the Cook Alliance. Professionally, I've been registered as an environmental health specialist in California for about 20 years. The REHS, after my name, that's what it stands for, Registered Environmental Health Specialist. And that registration is a state license, more or less, that's required for health inspectors to do their work. So for those of you who are working with your health department, your inspector either already has or is in a formal training program to receive their registered environmental health specialist certification, or the registration. I worked for 10 years as a regulator with Santa Barbara County, and in 4 of those, I was the supervisor in what we call our community health programs, and that include our food programs. And so that's where my professional focus is. It's the vast majority of the work I did as a regulator. It's actually typically the largest program in any environmental health program in the state is the retail food program. And I personally was really fortunate. I got to have a special focus on charitable feeding and temporary food facilities. And I was also the primary contact for our cottage food operations. And what that meant was that I actually had a lot of experience working with people who really loved to cook and had a lot of entrepreneurial spirit, but maybe didn't necessarily have a huge amount of experience in a professional food facility. So I did a lot of coaching, training, and educating as part of my job for the county, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. In 2021, Santa Barbara County adopted and implemented the MEHKO program. I was a supervisor during that process, and so I got to see the entire MEHKO implementation process from the environmental health perspective, from the very beginning of thinking about it all the way through to having it passed by our Board of Supervisors and implemented in the county. So that's also part of what I bring to the table here, is the experience from environmental health perspective of what it takes to actually launch and implement a successful MEHKO program. And then for the last 14 years, I have been teaching at our local community college. I teach sanitation to culinary arts students. I absolutely love the teaching and education. And so I also have that experience as well. So I want to talk a little bit about the grant background. California Conference of Directors of Environmental Health got $3 million as part of the MEHKO grant allocation that the state made in 2023. And that $3 million that CCDEH is administering actually comes from the California Workforce Development Board. So the focus is really helping to develop MEHKOs as a, an entrepreneurial opportunity for people in the state. That money is going to be transferred or given as direct grants to local environmental health agencies and code enforcement agencies. And then some of it will also be used to manage the grant and to provide technical assistance to those environmental health and code enforcement agencies, and to collaborate with and work with the industry. So that's my job. I'm the technical assistance part, and I'm also handling the code enforcement agency grants. I just want to be just really clear that in this particular part of what we do, CCDEH's role is not necessarily to advocate for or against MEHKOs. Our job is to help ensure that wherever MEHKOs are adopted in the state, that the agencies and operators have the resources that they need to safely operate them. And so that's really our focus, is looking at how do we support safe and equitable operation of MEHKOs where they have been adopted in the state. So CCDEH is going to use this grant, as I mentioned, in direct resources to agencies in terms of, direct funding, but also in the form of what I'm calling right now as a resource library. So part of my job is going to be pulling all of the current resources that are available for MEHKO programs. And for environmental health agencies, that's things like application forms and, standard operating procedures forms. For folks who are in the industry, that can be things like training materials and PowerPoint presentations and descriptions of approved processes, or examples of how you might fill out a standard operating procedure form, for example, as part of your application, and trying to put that all in one place so it's a lot easier for people to access and see. And then I'm also going to be developing and continuing to develop collaborative relationships between environmental health and the industry. So that's you guys and the Cook Alliance. And my job specifically will also be in providing training and technical support to environmental health agencies that are typically in the process of developing a MEHKO program and are trying to figure out the best way to do that. So there were some questions about how is the money that CCDEH is giving to environmental health and code enforcement agencies going to be dispersed? And there's two types of grants that we're currently doing in the program. I'm just going to go over these very briefly because I really want to get down to our conversation about developing relationships with environmental health. But I did want to share this so that everybody understands how this is working. Environmental health agencies will be able to apply for what are called entitlement or block grants, which means that they can go ahead and say, we would like, X amount of money and we are going to spend it on a MEHKO program. Those allocations are available to counties that have no MEHKOs and no plans or current intent to adopt them, because there's still work that they might need to do in terms of education or enforcement, or maybe a little bit of exploration if so required. We're also going to be able to give money to counties that currently do have MEHKO programs to support their current programs with needs they identify. And a substantial amount of the money is going to be going to counties that don't currently have MEHKO programs, but are exploring them or are in the ordinance process. And in one of the earlier presentations, there are several counties, as you know, that are they're on the runway, right? They're thinking about doing MEHKOs, and some of them are going to their boards of supervisors, and some of them are still doing exploration, but they're going to need extra support, and these grants can help with that. Code enforcement grants are actually going to be handled a little differently. They're going to be given to code enforcement agencies, which are separate from environmental health agencies. Environmental health focuses on food safety. Code enforcement tends to focus on things like parking and noise complaints and trash complaints, things that can make it challenging to have a pleasant experience in your neighborhood, that sort of thing. So code enforcement agencies will also be able to get some money from this grant. And their grants will be based on a reimbursement basis, which means that they'll have to tell us how they spent the money on MEHKOs before they can get reimbursed for it. It'll be based on their actual expenses, and up to $20,000 per jurisdiction will be what they're able to get. It's going to be given on a first come, first serve basis, and they'll need to apply by March, the end of March next year, in order to receive that money. The direct funding to environmental health agencies is about $2.2 million. So it's a substantial amount of money is available for direct funding. And for code enforcement, the total amount is about $291,000. environmental health agencies right now have indicated whether or not they're interested in being part of the grant funding. And some of them are in the process of going through their board of supervisors to get approval for the grants. So a lot of environmental health agencies can't just accept the grant directly. They have to take it to their county board of supervisors and get approval to receive the grant funding. And that process will be happening between now and May. CCDEH is going to be posting more details about which agencies are eligible for funding and which ones have received or are in the process of receiving funding, as well as the amounts they're receiving. We're going to post that on our website, which you can see here at ccdeh.org. And the MEHKO information about the grants and the funding information, as far as we know at this point, is all going to be over here in this red circled tab called events. It's a dynamic link. If you hover over events, you'll see a drop-down menu, and there's one that says MEHKO grant. If you click on that, there's more information about the MEHKO grants, and that's also where we're planning to post the information about how much money each jurisdiction is getting and what their timeline looks like. And then we're also going to share that information directly with the Cook Alliance, so that the Cook Alliance has that and can use that in their programs. So this resource library that I'm talking about, I'm actually super excited about, because one of the things that always drove me nuts as a regulator is that when we were bringing in a new program, I had to go and call or look on the websites of all the other counties that had done that program, or go to our technical meetings and ask, hey, how are you guys doing this? Can you share your forms? So one of the things we've decided to do is just to take all that information, sort through it, figure out which ones are the most useful, the most helpful, both for environmental health agencies and for MEHKO operators, and put them all in the same place so that it's really easy for a program that's about to start, like a county that passes MEHKOs. They can just go to that website and they can pull all that information, and then they can use it either as it is, or they can use it as a basis for their own forms. It'll actually save a huge amount of time and money and energy for environmental health. And our hope is that by identifying really good practices, we'll also be able to make it easier for MEHKO operators to fill out all those forms, because those of you who've filled out your MEHKO forms, that's a lot of paperwork. And sometimes it's a kind of confusing. And so part of my job is to help figure out, well, how do we make these more user-friendly for people? And we're also going to be talking with industry groups like the Cook Alliance today, and see if we can collaborate to figure out what will work best for you. Like, what makes a form easy to fill out? What information do you need? How can we make this more user-friendly process? So I'm really excited about this one. I do want to switch gears a little and talk about developing a relationship with your environmental health department. And what I tell my students is that I want you to think about your health department as your personalized food safety coaches. A lot of people call us the food police, and well, that's not quite right. Our job is really to be a coach and help make sure that you are successful in what you're doing. And I really do think about it as coaching, right? So if you think about like track and field, for example, if somebody is a high jumper, they have to jump over a bar. And if you're in a competition being judged, they'll tell you whether or not you made it over the bar. But if you're with your coach will say, hey, this is the height of the bar you need to get over. Let's figure out ways for you to get there. And so the health department has a legal obligation to assess your MEHKO and make sure that it's operating safely. But they also want you to be successful, right? You and they want the same things. You want to give healthy food to your community, and your health department wants you to give healthy food to your community. And so your health inspector can also be a fantastic source of information and advice on how to comply with state health and safety code. So we'll talk a little bit about how to develop that type of relationship. So one thing to keep in mind about environmental health agencies is that they're typically called the health department, but not all environmental health agencies are actually housed in the health department. Some environmental health agencies are their own department in your county or your city. Some of them are in the health department, and some of them are actually in a completely separate agency, like a resource management or environmental management agency. So when you say the health department, you might be meaning your environmental health inspector, but if you're talking about that in your county and they're not part of the health department, it can be a little confusing. So just understand that different environmental health departments in different parts of the state might be housed in different governmental administrative structures. That's just, each county kind of decides how they're going to do it. And also, environmental health is a core part of public health, but it really is focusing on making sure that people aren't harmed by the environment that they're in. So the way I think about it is that environmental health is helping make sure that the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the places that we live, work, and play are healthy and safe. And that includes also the food we eat. And so your health inspector is going to be coming to you with that mindset. They're looking to help make sure that the food that you make is healthy and safe for everybody that consumes it. Some of your environmental health departments are going to be very large, like Los Angeles, with hundreds of employees. And some are going to be very small, like Sierra County, that has 2 staff. And your environmental health department also typically has multiple programs. They do food safety, but they also might look at swimming pools and public and private semi-public spaces, ocean water quality monitoring for those counties that have recreational beaches. Many do tattoo artist and body art inspections. Some are in charge of cannabis regulation. Some do wells and water systems, solid waste. So there's a lot of work that happens in environmental health. It isn't just all about food. What environmental health agencies do have in common is that they all are they're basing their work off of the California Retail Food Code, and that provides clearly defined standards that the environmental health agency needs to apply to each facility appropriately, right? So as a MEHKO, you're in a home kitchen, you're not going to be held to the same commercial standards as a restaurant in terms of your equipment and necessarily how your plumbing works, but you will be held to the same standards in terms of food safety. So what your inspector is going to do is kind of look at your operation and be like, okay, how do we take what your skills have and what you have here in your home kitchen, your skill set and what you want to do, and make sure that you can do that safely. And they will help you tailor your operation to make sure that food safety is the priority, right? It's your priority, it's our priority, and make sure that that is a good outcome. It's a very structured process. Most environmental health agent departments have very clear steps that you go through to get your MEHKO permit and to go through the inspection. So that's something that you can expect, that there will be a structured process. Your inspector has a bachelor's degree with a significant amount of science, and they've either gone through a formal apprenticeship program or are currently in it, or had enough education to sit an 8-hour day-long exam in environmental health and safety. And so they're very highly trained professionals, and they'll use their professional judgment to identify risks and to suggest solutions. They also are required by law to document their findings in a written report, which you will receive a copy of, and they need to give you clear guidance about if there are problems, what those problems are. They're also fantastic source of resource information and guidance. They are in hundreds of food facilities every year. They see an awful lot of food preparation, and they're really great at identifying things that work in different types of situations. So if you have a question or something's coming up, your inspector might be a really great source of resources for how to solve that problem for you. And the other thing is that environmental health is going to be really focused on food safety. MEHKOs might also engage with code enforcement agencies that are really talking more about issues like parking or noise complaints. That is not something that environmental health would typically handle. So what's your first MEHKO inspection like, right? So I'm going to talk about your very first one where you've applied and they're like, great, we're going to come out and inspect your home kitchen. And this inspection is going to be like whether or not you get to open. And that can feel very, very stressful. And I just want to say, it's actually not the only inspection you'll get to have, which may or may not be a good thing, but we think it's a good thing, right? We want to have that ongoing conversation. But keep in mind that if the inspector finds challenges or issues at your first inspection, they'll give you a chance to correct them, and they'll come back and give you more opportunities to ask questions and to fix the problems, and they'll come back and do the inspection again. So it's not like if you don't pass the first time, you'll never get to have a MEHKO. No, you just fix the problems and then come back so that you can do it. So it's a relationship, right? It will be a scheduled inspection at your home. It will be set up for a specific time and date. They won't just drop by unannounced. It's similar to a restaurant inspection in that it's really focused on risks to food safety. And your inspector is going to look at the parts of your home that are used for the MEHKO. So any part of your home that stores food, equipment, utensils that is used by you or your guests, like the bathroom, will be part of the inspection. They're also going to ask you questions about your menu and your practices and your processes. They're making sure that what you're planning to do is consistent with state law. And they might ask you for an explanation or a demonstration. For example, I often ask people when I'm in their home kitchens, hey, could you show me how you sanitize your work surfaces? So I want to see people have their sanitizer test strips and their sanitizer and how they use it. And I want them to explain how they use it so that I know that they have the information and skills they need to keep food safe. Your inspector, like I said, will document or explain any errors or concerns. You'll have a chance to correct mistakes and violations. And the idea is this to be educational with mutual learning. When I was an inspector, I learned a huge amount of information from the folks I worked with, and I hope that they learned some stuff from me too. When you're developing a professional relationship with your inspector, keep in mind that it's a professional relationship. It's not a personal relationship, although in small towns, you might know your inspector. I'm in a fairly small town and I ended up knowing a lot of people that I worked for and with. But, we're talking of having a civil, respectful, courteous conversation. Also, please keep in mind, they are public employees and it is extremely awkward for them when you offer them foods, gift, or compensated meals or things like free appetizers, because many of them just cannot accept gifts from the public. But when we say no, it feels sometimes like a rejection of your offer of hospitality, which we don't want to do, right? Like we want to honor the hospitality you're extending, but we actually can't say yes. And so just keep in mind that it's better to not offer those things to your inspector to help keep it a professional relationship. Most inspectors are working on a time clock. There's an expected amount of time that each inspection will take. So sometimes they are very direct and to the point because they need to get in and out of your facility in order to meet their other obligations that day. So if you need more time with your inspector, it is okay to ask for it. But just because, but don't feel that because they're moving in and out fairly directly that, that there's something wrong. They might actually just have a lot to do that day, and they will make time for you if you ask for it. Inspectors are also pretty famous for being very direct and having direct conversations. It's not trying to be rude. We're just trying to make sure that it's very clear what we expect so that you don't have any confusion about what's going on with your facility. It's okay for you to ask questions, and we expect that. And it's common for people to have some violations. Sometimes a violation will ask you to close until you can fix it. And sometimes you can correct it on site. And sometimes you can take a little bit extra time to correct it, but stay open in the process. Your inspector will talk to you about that. And the real focus for us is that you're fixing issues promptly and responsibly. That's what your inspector wants to see. They want to see that you're taking responsibility and taking care of it, which everybody tends to want to do the right thing. So again, working on the same team. There are sometimes questions about like, what would keep me from getting a permit to operate? And there are some things, and here's some like classic examples. These aren't common, but if you like don't have any water at your house, like the water main broke and you don't have water or there's no hot water, your inspector would say, hey, you can't open until you have hot water. If your MEHKO isn't in your home's kitchen, for example, it's in an outbuilding or a garage, those aren't approved locations for MEHKOs, as you all know, so we wouldn't be able to say yes to that. If you have, like, say, a 1940s house with one electrical outlet in the kitchen and you have 5, what is it, power strips daisy chained with like a bunch of things plugged into them, we might say this looks kind of unsafe. We're not building inspectors. We don't have a lot of electrical inspection stuff, but that doesn't look safe to me. So you might want to talk to the building department about getting more electrical capacity if you're going to have these 8 appliances. So that sort of thing is something to keep in mind. Can your home infrastructure actually support the work you're doing safely? That also goes for like sewage and approved restrooms and refrigeration. If you have a really intense pest infestation, if we see evidence of mice, rats, flies, cockroaches, we'll ask you to correct that before you open. And remember that you cannot have certain foods in your MEHKO. So you can't have raw oysters, you can't make your own ice cream, and you can't make any foods that require a HACCP plan. That's a more advanced form of food safety for things that are higher risk, like pickling, canned pickling items, or smoking foods for preservation, not for flavor. Those are things that you wouldn't be able to do in a MEHKO. Okay, I'm finishing up here. Thank you, until 2:30. Okay, Roya, I'm done with 5-minute warning. Just want to be clear. I want to have time for questions, and we're probably out of them. Whenever you're in a conversation with environmental health, just keep in mind, that your inspector and you are in a conversation, but the public is also always there. And your inspector is always going to want to prioritize the health and safety of the public. They're also, that is their legal obligation. So sometimes when you're talking, you're feeling like, hey, they're not really working with me. I don't feel like they're really, you know, there for me the way I want them to be. Just keep in mind that while you're important to them, their priority is the general public's health and safety, and that's who they have to take care of first. So just be aware that there's actually 3 parties in the conversation, not just 2. I'm really curious about what information you would find that would make things more easy for you as operators, like what sorts of training materials or videos or checklists or presentations you would find helpful. And I'm really going to encourage you to get in touch with me at this contact Kendra Wise at ccdeh.com. That's also my phone, my direct phone number, so you can call me or text me with ideas or questions. And I think we have like 2 minutes. If there are any questions from the floor, I'm happy to take them.
I think there's one in the chat.
Is there? Okay, thank you. So the question is, do you know if it's possible to access data on health-related complaints against MEHKOs? Washington State's Organization of Local Public Health Officials has pushed back against MEHKOs on a public health basis, so it could be valuable to show whether complaints or health issues of MEHKOs are actually frequent or not. So there isn't a centralized location for MEHKO complaints at this time. But keep in mind that environmental health agencies are public agencies. And so you can always file what's called a Freedom of Information Act request. Now we have 62 environmental health jurisdictions in California. That would be a lot of requests, but you can ask for that information from your local agencies. And sometimes you can just call and say, hey, can we get that? That's actually a really great suggestion for my work and the work with the Cook Alliance. And so I can see if we might be able to come up with sort of a centralized clearinghouse of that sort of information. One of the challenges is that MEHKOs aren't just monitored by environmental health, they're also responded to by code enforcement agencies. So we're talking about more than just the 62 jurisdictions in California. We'd be talking about also all the code enforcement and agencies at cities and counties. So it's actually possibly a lot of agencies collecting that data. Not sure how quickly we'd be able to do that. But I think I understand your question, and we'll see, maybe be in contact with me or with the Cook Alliance, and we'll see if we can collaborate on that. There's a bunch more. My email address, oh good, thanks Roya for putting that in the chat, is in the chat, and it's also on the screen. And I'm trying to think if there are any last questions. It looks like there's one more question. Nope. Okay. There are no more questions. I'm done. Thank you all so much for your time, and please, I love to get emails and phone calls with questions, so feel free to contact me, give me a call. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kendra. Thank you for sharing your contact information. We're really excited to be working with you. I think, being able to work directly with environmental health has been so helpful for being able to provide more resources, tools, but also just share more education. So it's great that you'll be continuing to join some of our Cook chats and be available as a resource. So thank you again. And if anyone has any questions, please reach out to her email address.